Namaskar. Welcome to the session on Technology of Cereals and Millets. Introduction. Throughout the world, there is a great variety of types and amounts of grain products that are consumed by individuals. The nutritional importance of grains has a foundation of a good diet. Cereals form the staple food of the human race. In India, wheat, rice, maize, corn, oats, sorghum, that is jowar, ragi and bajra are the common cereals and millets used. Cereals are an important and economic source of energy. 100 grams of cereals supply 340 kilocalories of energy. Cereals are also a significant source of proteins, 8 to 11%. Millets are hardy plants capable of growing where most other grain cereals would fail. They are mostly grown in areas with low rainfall, poor irrigation facilities and low fertility. These are well suited for dry farming. In this chapter, the variety of cereals and millets, milling and byproducts are presented. Thorough study of this unit, you will be able to understand milling aspects, byproducts and uses of the following cereals and millets: corn, barley, oats, sorghum and millets, rye and triticale. Now first coming to corn. Maize, maize, known as corn, is utilized in more diversified ways than any other cereal. With its high percentage of carbohydrate, lipid and protein, it is nutritious for human consumption. A high percentage of maize grown in developing countries is used for food. In developed countries, maize is used as an animal feed. Maize is also used for the manufacture of starch, sugar, that is corn sugar, dextrin, syrup, that is corn syrup, and industrial alcoholic beverages. Milling. Maize is milled by a dry or wet process. In both processes, the germ is separated from the grain in order to extract and recover germ oil. After degermination, the dry milling employs roller mills and the process is somewhat similar to wheat milling. Wet milling involves a steeping stage and complete disintegration of the endosperm in order to recover starch and protein. Dry milling. In dry milling, the grains are cleaned and conditioned by addition of cold or hot water or steam, which results in the loosening of and toughening of the germ and bran. The endosperm is moistened to an ideal moisture content such that the yield of grits is maximum. The conditioned grain is passed through a suitable machine to separate bran and germ. The stalk after degermination is dried to 15 to 50% moisture content and then sifted to produce a number of fractions. The large, medium and finer fractions, that is hominy, are finished grits meal, that is corn meal, is a product somewhat smaller than grits but still much coarser than corn flour, and flour is sifted. The yield of products in dry maize milling is as follows: grits 40, coarse meal 20, fine meal 10 inches flour 5, germ 14 and hominy feed 11%. Wet milling. In wet milling, maize is milled to obtain starch, oil, cattle feed and the products of starch hydrolysis, that is liquid and solid glucose and syrup. The first step in wet milling is steeping. The cleaned maize is steeped for 48 hours in warm water, 50 degrees Celsius, containing sulfur dioxide. Steeping in water softens the kernel and assists separation of the hull, germ and fiber from each other. After steeping, the steeped water is drained off and the maize is coarsely ground in degerminating mills to free the germ from the grain. Then, the ground material flows down, separating troughs in which hulls and grits settle while the germ overflows. The germ is then separated, dried and oil extracted by hydraulic pressing or by using a solvent. The degerminated material in the separating troughs is then finely ground in a bhar or attrition mill. The hulls and fibre, which are not reduced so much in size, can then be separated from the protein and starch by sieving. The suspensions of starch and protein from wet screening is adjusted to a specific gravity of 1.04 by dewatering over string filters, and the starch is separated from the protein by continuous centrifugation. Finally, the starch is filtered and dried. The protein in the steep water is recovered by vacuum evaporation and dried as gluten feed for animal feeding. Corn flour. First, dried maize is soaked in a solution of water with lime, often with ashes mixed in it. The grain is then cooked, steeped, drained and rinsed multiple times. The grain is then ground to make a wet dough from which tortillas are formed or allowed to dry into flour. Flaked maize cereal, that is cornflakes. Cornflake is a ready-to-eat breakfast cereal that only requires the addition of milk. The basic objective in making flaked cereals is to obtain grain grits from the whole grain that would each produce a flake. Barley. Barley is one of the world's oldest cultivated cereals. It was used as a bread grain in early times. Nowadays, barley is extensively used as food, cattle feed and for malting and brewing. Barley is by far the most important cereal grain for malting because of its specific physical and chemical properties. Milling. Barley is milled to make blocked barley, pearl barley, barley groats, that is grits, barley flakes and barley flour. A sequence of operations is as follows. Barley is cleaned and conditioned, that is its moisture content is adjusted by drying or damping. The conditioned barley is next subjected to blocking, that is shelling, and pearling, that is rounding. Both blocking and pearling are abrasive process differing in degree of the removal of the superficial layers of the grain. Blocking removes part of the husk and pearling the remainder of the husk and part of the endosperm. Aspiration of the blocked or pearled grain removes the abraded portions. The grain is then cut into portions known as grits. The grits are graded by size and then rounded in a pearling machine and polished. Pearl barley has had the bran removed and has been steamed and polished. It comes in three sizes, that is coarse, medium and fine, and can be used as an ingredient in soups, stews and salads. While pearl barley is much more tender and quicker to cook than the whole grain variety, it is also slightly lower in nutrients. Barley flakes are made from pearl barley by steaming and flaking on a smooth, large diameter roller. Pearl or blocked barley is converted to barley flour in roller mills. Barley flour can also be milled from whole barley. The flour is also a byproduct of the cutting, pearling and polishing processes. Oats. Oat is an important cereal crop fed to animals such as horses and sheep and also used by humans. It is valued for its high protein content. It is an important cereal crop which can be used as oatmeal, bran, flakes in breakfast cereals, and it appears as a white covered coat. Milling. The processing of oats in mills is different from that of wheat because of the difference in the structure and composition between the two cereals. In milling, cleaned oats are subjected to kiln drying to inactivate lipase. This process is known as stabilization. Stabilization also reduces moisture content and facilitates the subsequent shelling of the oats. The kiln-dried oats are then shelled, resulting in the splitting of the husk. The shelled groats are then polished, and after removal of oat dust, they are transversely cut so that each kernel gives about 4 to 5 pieces, that is pinhead meal. This is subjected to further grinding when oatmeal is obtained. Oat flour is the milled flour product from hulled oats and is used in baked products, granola bars and ready-to-eat breakfast cereals. It is especially valuable in infant foods due to the high nutritional value and low allergenicity and pleasant flavor. It is widely used as one of the first solid foods introduced to babies or as a thickener in various commercial infant products. Oat flakes or rolled oats are manufactured from pinhead meal or from whole uncut groats. By cooking the pinhead meal in a steamer, rolling the cooked product while hot, moist and plastic between heavy rollers and drying the flakes so formed. Now next is sorghum and millets. Millet is the general name for small seed grass crops. The crops are harvested for food or animal feed. Apart from maize and sorghum, the major millet crops of India are pearl millet, that is Pennisetum typhoideum, called bajra, and finger millet, that is Eleusine coracanca, known as ragi. A number of other minor millets are grown and they are the proso, that is the most common, foxtail and kodo. Millet is related to sorghum. Sorghum is a special type of millet with large seeds. Sorghum. Sorghum grain is known as jawar and constitutes an important article of food after rice and wheat. The whole grain or broken grain may be cooked like rice or the whole grain ground to flour and used to make chapatis. In Africa, sorghum is used as food in various forms as porridge, gruel and parched, popped or malted grain. From a blend of wheat flour, baked products like muffins, bread and cakes can be produced. In advanced countries, the grain is used chiefly as an animal feed. Sorghum grain is used as a source of starch in the fermentation industry for producing industrial alcohol and solvents. Milling. Sorghum grains are processed by dry milling and wet milling. The products of milling are chiefly starch and feed products. However, very few processed products of sorghum are commercially produced. Dry milling is used to obtain products low in fiber, fat and ash, and wet milling to make starch and its derivatives. The residue from wet milling is used as a feed. Dry milling. The dry milling process starts with the cleaning of grains. The cleaned grain is conditioned by addition of water to soften the endosperm and milled by the conventional roller mills to separate endosperm, germ and bran from each other. The endosperm is recovered in the form of grits with the minimum production of flour. Yields of various fractions from the dry milling process are grit 76.7, bran 1.2, germ 11, fiber 10%. Bran and germ are further processed, as in the case of maize, by dry milling for the preparation of oils and feeds. Wet milling. Wet milling of sorghum is carried out by methods similar to that of maize wet milling. However, the milling of sorghum is more difficult than that of maize because of the small size and spherical shape of the sorghum kernel and the dense high protein peripheral endosperm layer. Manufacture of starch is the main purpose of wet milling. However, some of the pigments of the pericarp and subcoat of the grain leach out and stain the starch. Millets. Pearl millet is a native of Africa and is successfully cultivated in India. The processing of this millet for industrial purposes has not yet been developed. More commonly, it is ground into flour and made into chapatis. It is also made into thin porridge. The grain is sometimes eaten after it is parched, the product being similar to popcorn. The grain is suitable for the preparation of malt. Finger millet is so called because of the ear, that is head of grain, consists of 5 spikes which radiate, sometimes in a curving manner, from a central point, rather as the fingers attached to the palm of the hand. Finger millet or ragi is another important millet cultivated in India. Ragi can be milled by wet conditioning. It can be steamed followed by milling in a hammer or plate mill or a roller floor mill. Ragi is usually converted into flour and a variety of preparation like ragi balls, chapati, dosa and porridge. The grain is also malted and the flour of the malted grain is used as a nourishing food for infants and geriatrics. Malted ragi flour is called ragi malt and is used in the preparation of milk beverages. A fermented drink or beer is also prepared from the grain in some parts of the country. Rye and triticale. Rye is richer in lysine than wheat but has a relatively low gluten forming potential and therefore does not contribute as good a structure to dough as does wheat. It frequently is used in combination with wheat flour in breads and quick breads and is made into crackers. There are three types of rye, that is dark, medium and light, often baked into bread. Rye may be sprouted producing malt or malt flour. Triticale is a wheat and rye hybrid first produced in the United States in the late 1800s. Work for the introduction of triticale as a cereal grain in India is being carried out since 1974. As a crop, it offers the disease resistance of wheat and the hardiness of rye. It has more protein than either grain alone, but the overall crop yield is not high, so its use is not widespread. Triticale was developed to have the baking property of wheat, that is good gluten forming potential, and the nutritional quality of rye, that is high lysine. Milling. The processes of rye milling are similar to wheat milling and comprises of cleaning, conditioning and the milling process proper. The products of rye milling are flour for soft breads, coarse rye meal for hard breads and rye flakes for hot break for cereals. Health benefits of millets. Being economically feasible and high nutritious diet, millets also comprise other essential health benefits. Its outstanding composition makes it an effective food for the treatment of cancers, anemia, diabetes, constipation, non-communicable diseases and allergies. Millets contain several nutrients that supports in potential health benefits and thus accepted as functional and nutraceutical food. Few millets contain high amount of iron, but many non-nutrient components are responsible for decreasing the bioaccessibility of iron. By the use of household processing technologies such as germination and fermentation, the amount of non-nutrient components can be reduced and can support cure of anemia. The high fiber content of millets is helpful for those people who are dealing with the problem of obesity and constipation. Millets are good sources of fiber and can be used to prepare healthy foods. Millet grains are rich in antioxidants and phenolics, so they can contribute to antioxidant activity important in health, aging and metabolic syndrome. Phenolic compounds have also anti-cancer property. These compounds are concentrated in the pericarp and testa. Flavonoid, a phenolic compound, helps to inhibit tumor development and reduce the risk of breast cancer. Gluten intolerance is a physiological and lifelong disorder affecting humans in many areas of the world. Being a gluten-free grain, millets are useful for those people who are suffering from celiac disease. Millet diet considerably decreases blood glucose levels. Various millet-based food products have a lower glycemic index than those based on wheat. Low glycemic index of foods are useful because it improves the metabolic control of blood pressure and low density lipoprotein cholesterol level. Conclusion. The nutritional importance of grains has a foundation of a good diet. Cereals form the staple food of the human race. Millets are hardy plants capable of growing where most other grain cereals would fail. In India, Wheat, rice, maize, oats, sorghum, ragi and bajra are the common cereals and millets consumed. Maize is utilized in more diversified ways than any other cereal. Maize is used for the manufacture of cornflakes, starch, sugar, syrup, industrial alcohol and alcoholic beverages. Maize is milled by both dry or wet processes. Barley is by far the most important cereal grain for malting because of its specific physical and chemical properties. Barley is milled to make blocked barley, pearl barley, barley groats, barley flakes and barley flour. Oat is valued for its high protein content. It is an important cereal crop which can be used as oatmeal, bran, flakes in breakfast cereals. Apart from maize and sorghum, the major millet crops of India are pearl millet and finger millet. Sorghum grain are processed by dry milling and wet milling. Pearl millet and finger millets are used in the preparations of chapatis, thin porridge, parched, malted, and like ragi ball, chapati, dosa and porridge, malted forms respectively. Rye is richer in lysine than wheat but has a relatively low gluten forming potential. Triticale is a wheat and rye hybrid. The processes of rye milling are similar to wheat milling and the products are flour, coarse rye meal and rye flakes. Being economically feasible and high nutritious diet, millets are having outstanding nutritional composition which makes an effective food for the treatment of cancers, anemia, diabetes, constipation, non-communicable diseases and allergies. Therefore, millets are accepted as functional and nutraceutical food. Thank you.